Hello, I'm Joanne May. I am perhaps one of the newest members of the DuPage Symphony Orchestra, and I'm here tonight to have a chat with our guest artist who will be performing with the DuPage Symphony Orchestra on Saturday, November 19th at 7:30 p.m. in Wentz Hall in Naperville, Illinois. We hope you'll be able to join us, and we have a special announcement to say that if you are watching this event tonight, will be able to get 25% off of a ticket. The link and code can be found in the chat. So thank you very much for joining us. Before I bring Will on, I would like to tell you a little bit about him. He is a world-renowned violinist who has, I have just learned, a very close tie with Chicago, has spent quite a bit of time in Chicago. He's appeared with the Chicago Symphony and the Grant Park Symphony, but he also has been all over the world performing in Germany and in England and many other places. He spends quite a lot of time on both sides of the Atlantic. And so we're very delighted to have him with us for this concert. He's a native of Salt Lake City, Utah, and began playing violin at the age of 4. He studied, fast forward to college days, with Itzhak Perlman and Catherine Cho at the Juilliard School, and also has had his teachers mentor him. They were Christian Tetzlaff and also Robert Lipset. William also won a 3rd prize in the Queen Elizabeth competition in Brussels. One thing that I think is also very special about his connection with Chicago is that he plays on the 1732 Arkwright Lady Rebecca Sylvan Antonio Stradivari violin. And that is, here's the connection, on generous loan from the Rachel Barton Pine Foundation. So please, without further ado, let's welcome Will to the chat. Well, here we are with Will. I'm so happy that we have things worked out to have Will join us for this Meet the Artist time. And Will, you'll be performing the Lalo Symphonie espagnole. Why do you love this piece, and why are you joining us to perform it?
Why do I love it? It's hard to say. When I listen to music, I hear adjectives, I hear feelings. I don't have a protagonist, and some people have a really specific story that they're thinking of, but this piece is just so completely filled, just from the first note to the last, with there's so much contrast. There's so many adjectives and so many feelings in this piece. And I know it's not unique to this piece, but there's something about this piece that is so much fun to play. The Spanish flavor. I've always really loved Spanish music, and we really don't get to do that a whole lot in concertos. It's not to say that there aren't any Spanish influences in the violin concerto repertoire, but this is really the example of it. It's extremely virtuosic. It's so beautiful. And the 5-movement structure makes it just different enough from your typical violin concerto to make it, I don't know, I feel like it almost feels, you really feel that different structure. It's not just, oh, we're adding 2 movements to this. It's I feel like we get to cover more ground. We get to hear more things. I could go on, but I'm always wanting to play this piece. When I meet a new conductor and we talk about wanting to work together again, I say, let's do Lalo. When I'm talking to my management, they can tell you I'm always saying, let's do Lalo. So anyway, I couldn't be more thrilled to be playing this piece. I am a huge fan of it.
That's fabulous. Well, it fits right into our theme for the concert, which is the music of Mexico and Spain. However, Lalo is a French composer. Can you explain why this piece is on this concert?
Yes, it was written by a French guy, but it is absolutely Spanish music. All the rhythms, all the melodic, even just the little ornamentations, they're all straight out of Spanish music. I like to say that I really love Spanish music written by French people, because Saint-Saëns wrote some really amazing Spanish themed music. You know, the introduction in Rondo Capriccioso is very Spanish themed, and the Habanese is also obviously very very Spanish. And so I mean, not only do they share a border, but you can see this is a very respectful and loving depiction of Spanish music by the Frenchman Lalo. So everything about this piece is really Spanish, and yes, it was written by a French guy, but it's really Spanish.
Well, speaking of this piece and the Spanish flavor, I believe you're prepared to play a few excerpts. Would you like to talk about
Yeah,
that a
I
little
mean,
bit?
well, as we go through the piece, I can kind of play a thing here, a thing there. You know, I just start at the beginning of the piece. Here you really hear the Spanish flair. I mean, all over it, but all those things are all over the whole piece. And I absolutely love this piece. And that 3 against 2, bum 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 bum. Just a very simple 3 over 3 against 2 has always been one of my favorite things in music. You hear it in Tchaikovsky Concerto. By the way, this piece was a big inspiration for Tchaikovsky before he wrote his violin concerto. He really loved this piece and was really struck by this piece, and so I think this was really in his ear as he was writing his own violin concerto. Anyway, that's just one little. That's the very beginning of the piece. Well, the very beginning of the piece is just a very, very, very short introduction from the orchestra, and then I come in with that. Anyway, and then we've got 4 more movements, many different themes. I guess we can talk about each of the movements a little bit.
Well, maybe that 3 and 2 thing that shows up so evidently in the third movement, the intermezzo. That's all
Yes.
it is practically, isn't it? The 3
Yeah.
for one beat and then 2 for one beat. It's throughout. Do you want to talk about that one a little bit or play a little from that?
I can just play the very opening, well, in the violin part. The small note there is a triplet, so that little something about that triplet is just every note in this piece is fun. It's always dancing. It's always. I did kind of a clumsy job of saying why I love the piece so much, but that's what I meant by there's just always something to do. There's always something to say, and it's not. You don't have to show a whole lot of restraint in this piece. It's very out there, you know, and
A lot of fun. And aren't those rhythms? They're dance rhythms, are they not? I mean, I think all of these are dance movements. Even the one that says Andante, the slow movement, still has some kind of movement, body movement, dancer movement involved. Am
yeah,
I right about that?
yeah, for sure. I mean, I think song and dance are really you go throughout any of the classical repertoire. It's most of Beethoven's and Schubert certainly, and anyway, most of the stuff you're hearing is based on folk melodies from here or there and dances. All of the Bach solo stuff, and even that You still hear the, and I would say this is more of a mournful Spanish song. There's definitely, I'm sure that there's um, a dance in there that somebody really fluent in Spanish music could tell us, could put a finger on exactly what it is. But there's always that really, how do I say this? There's just it's never subtle. It's never, it's really wearing its heart on its sleeve throughout. It's not to say that there isn't contrast. It's not this exhausting, there's the second movement is so sweet. It's so sweet. Then a totally different sound than the first movement, which is really kind of chest thumping, and that first orchestral tutti is really epic. That used to be, as a kid, that was like my favorite part of the whole piece. I felt like I was listening to like the Lord of the Rings soundtrack.
Oh my gosh. It's so fun to play. Oh my gosh. Well,
Yeah.
and it sounds like Lalo was exploring all the possibilities of Spanish music that he wanted to include 5 movements. I read that he had decided on 4 movements, and then he stuck the intermezzo in as the 5th, which is in the middle,
Yeah.
as sort of a tie to tie the scherzando together with the andante. Anyway, to put make it flow better. I think that's interesting because they're all about the same length. Each one of them is right around
Yes, they
7 minutes,
are.
right? Which is
Yeah,
unusual.
absolutely. It is unusual. The whole the length, having even length of the, often with a piece like Tchaikovsky, you get a 19-minute first movement, give or take, 6-minute second movement, and a 10-minute last movement. Brahms would be closer to 20, 10, 10. And here we get 7, 7, 7, 7, 7. But I wanted to say, when you were talking about the intermezzo, aren't we lucky that he included it, because it is
Oh my gosh.
so much fun. And it's, I think, pretty criminal that people used to not play it. You can go back, it's not ancient history. It's, I don't want to name names, but some very, very famous violinists of the mid to late 20th century would not record the third movement. And I, whenever I see those albums with a 4-movement Lalo, I think, oh no, what a missed opportunity. It's the best music. It's such great music throughout. I had heard that some people were a little scandalized by that third movement. They thought it sounded too sexy. And it's a wonderful problem to have, in my opinion. I absolutely love the piece, and I find the second movement very sexy too. This is one of the this is one of the sexiest pieces in the violin repertoire for sure, and just hyper expressive throughout. Virtuosity. The fourth movement we were just talking about. I mean, it's really so moving. It's such a kind of deeply felt movement. Right before we go into the fun of the flash and dash of the last movement, I can play just the beginning of that.
Yeah, let's hear a little bit of that too. That's
And say so on, and it very quickly turns a. And just nonstop virtuosic flair. It's a very, very difficult last movement. The difficulty and what Lalo asks of the solo violin is more similar to like a Paganini concerto than it is to other things. But having played the Paganini concerto and having played this I think is a lot more fun. Not to diss the Paganini concerto, which is really a delightful Italian opera piece, but it is. This is just, there's more variety in this, and I really love it.
Well, I have a question for you about your instrument and playing this 1732 instrument in a concert hall meant for, well, when the piece was written, the Lalo was written in the 19th century, now for modern audiences in giant auditoriums. The instrument itself, when it was first built, wasn't meant for these spaces. What can you tell us about? Have there been improvements on it? I'd love to hear something about the history of this particular instrument.
So the first thing I would say is that, yeah, it's miraculous how good these instruments sound, given that they were, I think, originally made. It would have been a shorter fingerboard. It would have been obviously a very different bow. It would have been used for a completely different repertoire. I used to play on a 1675 Andrea Guarneri, and it's this big fat violin. When I say fat, I mean this is a very above average fat Strad right here. And the violin I played on before was even more football shaped. And those violins they have many of them have a really beautiful sound, but not a giant, big concert sound. And Strad started his career in the 1600s. He's a very long-lived man. This is one of the last violins he would have made, and he would have been in his late 80s, early 90s when he made this violin, which is kind of mind-blowing. But if you look at the violins made in the 1600s versus the violins made in the 1700s by Strad, there's a real change in the shape. They get flatter. The old ones are called a long pattern Strad, so he was becoming famous for this slightly bigger violin. But this is definitely a wider Strad than that, and not all Strads are created equal. I've played on some that I thought were not actually a very remarkable violin as far as the sound goes. And then this one where even just today I came in, my wife was working, I said, "You've got to hear how good this violin sounds today." I mean, something about the adjustments just there. And it's just, every day that I get to play on this violin, I am overjoyed. This is really one of the good ones. Anyway, sorry for the spiel, but the late Strads, the gold period to late Strads and the Del Jesus were these flatter violins. And if you play on, those have always been the choice of violin soloists who had their choice. So they had their choice of any violin. Almost always they go with a Strat or a Del Jesus. There are really great modern violins being made nowadays, for sure. But I am so thrilled with this violin. I really love it.
That's fabulous. And the Rachel Barton Pine Foundation, how did you get connected with that?
Rachel and I have the same manager, John Zion, and I was playing, I think, at an event for Grant Park Music Festival in Chicago, and she happened to be in town. And we met. One thing led to another. And this violin had been sitting not too long, but it had been, I think it had been loaned to a quartet where they gave it back because it was too bright and powerful a violin, and it couldn't blend. Which is, I hear that and I go, give me that thing. As a soloist trying to play Lalo in front of dozens of instruments, that it's really, volume is a nice thing to have. And a lot of people hear, oh, he wants to, why would you want to play on just these loud violins? Wouldn't you want something with the quality of the sound? Quality of the sound is great, but if you can't hear it, then you can't play quietly. So a more powerful violin, actually, I find on this violin, it allows me to play more sensitively and more intimately than on a violin that is supposed to, have this beautiful sound. And this, of course, has such a beautiful sound, plus the power, plus this, plus that. It's just got everything. But anyway, I played the violin and was just head over heels with it. And Rachel, and it's just incredible that her foundation has lent me this violin. I'm really, really deeply grateful to play on it. And I think it's now been about 4 or 5 years playing on this violin. And yeah, I just couldn't be more thrilled.
That's fantastic. I want to go back to your very beginnings. How did you decide to play the violin when you were 4? Did your parents just do it for you, or did you have something to say about it as you were a beginner? And did you ever imagine that you'd be soloing around the world and playing a Stradivari violin?
So I was apparently kind of a crazy little kid. My parents described me as having been worryingly crazy. I just had so much energy and was really bouncing off the walls. And I heard the violin when I was 3 years old. And, I obviously don't have a super clear memory of 3-year-old me and my psyche at the time, but my parents tell me that I was really begging for a violin repeatedly, which, now that I'm around my 3-year-old nieces and nephews, I'm like, it's amazing for a kid to beg for something longer than 30 seconds. So for me to have remembered the violin multiple days, multiple weeks, even multiple months in a row, it must have made a real impression. My parents wanted us to get music lessons just like they wanted us to, read books and get involved in sports and just do normal things. There was absolutely no plan. I'm not from a family of musicians. I got a violin after an intense begging campaign when I was 4 years old, which is really early to start. But I was really lucky to have great teachers right from the start. Natalie Reed, who was a student of Joseph Gingold, and then Debbie Minch, who's she's a legend in the Suzuki world. So she was really my first kind of like my beginner teacher. And Natalie Reed was somebody I would play for all the time, even when I started studying with Lipset at Colburn. To answer the question, did I ever see myself soloing on stages? Yes, but I don't mean that in an arrogant way. I also thought that I would be the shortstop for the San Francisco Giants, and I grew up during the Bulls versus Jazz '98 finals, which was Stockton and Malone and Pippen and Jordan and Rodman. So that was like the best basketball viewing probably of my lifetime. And so, of course, I wanted to be in the NBA. And I really liked Karl Malone, who's a 6'9" power forward. And my dad is 5'8", pushing 5'9". My mom's 5'3". And so I reasonably assumed that I would be 6'9" or 10 and be the power forward for the Utah Jazz when I grew up. And the shortstop. We're really a baseball family. And so baseball is really my first sport. And I also thought, during football season, I'd like to be the quarterback for the 49ers too. And then I heard Itzhak Perlman, and I went, oh, wow, that's what I really want to do. And so before, I had been really blown away with the sound of the violin, and I loved playing the violin, but I think it was just like a thing that I wanted to do. And then I heard Itzhak Perlman play Tempo di Minuetto by Chrysler. To this day, I think one of the prettiest things, though. I thought that was just the prettiest thing I'd ever heard. And now I get emotional listening to it, even as a little kid. And so I heard that and thought, that's what I want to do. And it is not lost on me how cool it is that I actually am doing that now. I had no idea who Robert Lipset was when I started the violin. We didn't know what the Colburn School was. We didn't know what the Curtis Institute was. We didn't know anything about music or about the music world. And anywho, somebody said, you should go play for Robert Lipset. And so I went down and I played for Robert Lipset, assuming it was a master class. And he said, would you like to come study with me in Los Angeles? And it was kind of like a spit out the drink. What? So that was, it was just really serendipitous. And he was my teacher for 11 years in total. And then I got to study with Itzhak Perlman, who was my idol. And, that original Tempo de Minuetto recording was really what inspired me. And then I got to study, my most recent teacher was Christian Tetzlaff, who is such an amazing player. Also, by the way, I will say, a huge fan of Lalo. I remember, so Tetzlaff really has a Bach, Mozart, Schubert sort of reputation. And I brought Mozart Concerto No. 4 and Lalo to him for this masterclass. And I said, would you like to hear Lalo or Mozart? He said, Lalo, like without skipping a beat. So he's a real proponent of the piece too. But anyway, getting back to the subject, I'm so fortunate to be doing what I always dreamed of doing. So yes, I did see myself on, dream of soloing with orchestras, but it was like a boyhood, naive sort of dream, and it really has come true. So I feel very lucky.
Well, we're very lucky to have you join us, and actually would like to ask you one more question before I remind everyone what this is all about, what this little chat is all about. But that is, where are you going next? You're going to be with us on the 19th, and do you know your calendar, or do you know what your next performances are going to be?
So before the Lalo with you guys, I'm leaving tomorrow to Oklahoma City to play a recital in Oklahoma on Sunday. And then I'll be in Chicago with you guys next week. And then I get a little bit of a break for Thanksgiving and such. And then I go to Slovenia. I still go to Europe quite a lot. I have lots of friends in Europe, and I'm really excited for that trip because I'm going to get to see some friends that I haven't seen since the pandemic. So really excited for that. And then back to New York. And then, yeah, I was just in Colombia and Ireland, and it's just really, really fun for me to see all these exotic places. And I've always really liked traveling. I don't love delayed flights and airports and such, but I try not to complain about it because it's really cool to see the world.
Well, it's exciting that you're able to go now where it wasn't possible to do that very recently. So I hope you're making up for lost time. It sounds like you are, which is excellent. And we hope you'll be back in Chicago again very soon. This is so exciting to have you with us. I do want to do one more little reminder to everyone who's listening that we do have our concert on Saturday the 19th with Will playing the Lalo, the whole complete 5 movements with the DuPage Symphony Orchestra, the 19th at 7:30 p.m. in Wentz Hall, Naperville, Illinois. And if you're watching tonight, you have a 25% discount on the ticket. So please check the chat. And that sort of wraps up our time together. Unless, Will, you have anything else that you'd like to add or play or say?
I think I've said it all. Just the most important thing is that I absolutely love the Lalo. I love what I do, and I especially love the Lalo. And I love Chicago. Can't wait to be back. So I can't wait for this. And it's been lovely talking to you, by the way.
Really lovely to talk to you, and we get a chance to do some dress rehearsals and the performance coming up. So I'm looking forward to that a lot. Yeah, well, thanks so much for being with us, and thanks to everyone who was able to join us. Sorry about the glitch at the beginning, but those things happen, and off we go, and hope you'll join us on the 19th.